Most people find it frustrating to wake up in the middle of the night just to use the bathroom. But for 29-year-old Harrison Okene, the decision to leave his bunk on May 26, 2013 ended up saving his life. In a strange twist of fate, he became the sole survivor of a tragic shipwreck and the only person known to have endured nearly 3 days trapped at the bottom of the sea. The incident took place in the Gulf of Guinea, off the coast of Nigeria, an area of the Atlantic Ocean where oil drilling is common due to its petroleum-rich seabed. That morning, about 20 miles from Escravos, 3 tugboats were assisting a Chevron oil tanker at single-buoy mooring. The seas were rough, and at around 5 a.m., one of the vessels, the Sunken 4, was struck by a massive rogue wave and overturned. Because of frequent pirate attacks in the region, safety procedures required the 12-man crew to lock their cabin doors while they slept. Tragically, this security measure slowed their escape once the tug began to sink. Harrison, the ship's cook, had already gotten up and left his cabin to use the bathroom, wearing only his underwear. As the vessel rolled and water poured in, Harrison struggled to push open the bathroom's metal door against the powerful force of the flood. He was unable to reach the emergency exit hatch like some of his fellow crew members. He could only watch helplessly as 3 men were swept away by a violent surge of water. The same current forced Harrison down a narrow passageway and into another bathroom connected to an officer's cabin. Battered and disoriented, he managed to cling to an overturned sink to keep his head above the rising seawater in the tiny 4-foot-wide space. Meanwhile, the tugboat continued its descent until it settled upside down nearly 100 feet below the surface. Rescue operations began immediately, with nearby ships and a helicopter rushing to the site. Divers soon located the wreck and placed marker buoys above it. They tapped on the steel hull, searching for survivors. Harrison desperately pounded back, but his signals went unheard. The divers assigned to the wreck were not equipped for long periods of deep water work, so they could only remain near the sunken tug for a short time. After several attempts without finding any signs of life, the initial rescue mission was abandoned. Nearly a full day into his ordeal, Harrison gathered the courage to leave the cramped bathroom pocket where he had been clinging to survival. Feeling his way blindly through the pitch-black wreck, he swam into the engineer's office and, to his relief, discovered another air bubble. This one rose to about 4 feet in height, enough space for him to breathe more comfortably. With air no longer his most immediate concern, Harrison turned his focus to another threat: the cold. While the surface waters of the Gulf of Guinea average a balmy 82 degrees Fahrenheit in May, Harrison was trapped nearly 100 feet down. Clad only in his underwear and constantly wet, his body was losing heat rapidly, putting him in danger of hypothermia. Carefully, he groped around the cabin until he found tools. Using them, he pried away wooden wall panels. With these, along with a mattress he located, he managed to fashion a makeshift platform. By sitting on it, he could keep the upper part of his body out of the water and conserve precious body heat. Still, his situation was dire. He was hungry, thirsty, freezing, and enveloped in total darkness. Fear pressed down on him constantly. A devout man, Harrison turned to prayer, asking Jesus for deliverance whenever the terror threatened to overwhelm him. Time passed painfully. The salty seawater began stripping the skin from his tongue. A nauseating smell hung in the air, likely the decomposing bodies of his fellow crewmen. Every noise in the wreck echoed unnervingly. The groans of shifting metal, debris clattering against bulkheads, and worst of all, the sounds of fish tearing at the corpses around him. Meanwhile, the dive support vessel, Okene, had arrived at the site. The owner of the Sunken 4, West African Ventures, had contracted a professional saturation diving team from DCN Global to recover the bodies of the crew. The task would not be easy. Besides the emotional weight of recovering the dead, the tug had come to rest upside down in soft seabed mud. The disturbed silt reduced visibility to almost nothing, and internal security locks meant the vessel was sealed from the inside. The second dive team, consisting of Nico van Heerden, Andre Erasmus, and Daryl Oosthuizen, entered the operation with Supervisor Colby Werrett coordinating topside. Werrett monitored the divers through a helmet-mounted camera worn by Nico and maintained constant communication via microphone. The men spent over an hour cutting through an outer watertight door and then another thick steel barrier before finally gaining entry. Inside, the disorienting environment made progress difficult. The ceiling had become the floor was overhead, and the murky water concealed dangerous obstacles like floating furniture and heavy equipment. The divers pressed deeper into the overturned vessel, moving slowly and carefully through its twisted, murky passageways. They had already recovered 4 bodies when Nico van Heerden squeezed his way up a stairwell toward what had once been the main deck. His bulky diving gear made the passage tight, and he paused briefly to get his bearings. That's when, out of the darkness, something unexpected brushed against him. Inside the wreck, Harrison had nearly abandoned all hope. He thought he had heard the sound of an anchor chain dropping, and later faint hammering against the hull. Convinced divers were near, he pounded back on the metal walls, though he wasn't sure his signals carried. At one point, he even glimpsed the glow of a diver's helmet light sweeping past the far end of the cabin. But the figure moved on too quickly for him to reach. Then came the extraordinary moment. On the video, recorded by Nico's helmet camera, footage that has since been seen around the world, Nico assumed he had come across another corpse. He reached out to touch the hand of what he thought was a lifeless body, only to feel the fingers squeeze his in return. Shocked, Nico jerked back, while topside supervisor Colby Werrett, watching the live feed, shouted in disbelief, "He's alive!" Werrett immediately instructed Nico to calm the survivor with reassuring gestures, telling him to pat Harrison on the shoulder and give him a thumbs up. The team was stunned. Not only had they located a survivor, but they had found one who had been breathing in a pressurized air bubble for almost 3 days. To put it in perspective, the maximum recommended depth for recreational diving is 130 feet, and at 100 feet, most divers remain for no more than 20 minutes. Harrison had endured 60 hours. The science of his survival was remarkable. A person typically consumes around 350 cubic feet of air per day. But at that depth, the increased pressure had compressed the air pocket to roughly a quarter of its volume. If the bubble originally held about 216 cubic feet, the compressed oxygen supply would barely have been enough to last 2.5 days, almost exactly the time Harrison managed to survive. There was another deadly risk as well: carbon dioxide poisoning. When CO2 levels reach about 5%, they become fatal. With every breath, Harrison had been releasing carbon dioxide into his limited space. Fortunately, the water below him absorbed some of it. By instinctively splashing the water to keep himself afloat, Harrison had increased the surface area, which in turn allowed more CO2 to dissolve. That simple act may have kept the gas levels just below the lethal threshold. By the time divers reached him, Harrison was showing clear signs of CO2 buildup, shortness of breath, confusion, and exhaustion. he could not have lasted much longer on his own. Once the divers realized Harrison was alive, their first priority was stabilizing him. They poured hot water over his body to bring his temperature back up and placed an oxygen mask on him so he could breathe clean air. At the same time, the crew on the support vessel coordinated with doctors and diving specialists on shore to determine the safest way to bring him out. The greatest danger now was decompression sickness, commonly called the bends. This condition occurs when a diver ascends too quickly from depth, causing nitrogen that has dissolved in the blood under pressure to form bubbles. These bubbles can lead to painful joints, skin irritation, paralysis, neurological problems, heart failure, or even death. The experts decided to treat Harrison the same way they would a saturation diver returning from a long shift underwater. For about 20 minutes, he was gradually acclimated to the oxygen mask. Then the divers carefully fitted him with a full diving helmet and safety harness. They worried he might panic once they tried to move him out of the wreck, but Harrison remained calm and composed throughout, earning the divers' admiration. From there, they guided him out of the sunken tugboat and into a diving bell, which carried him safely to the surface. When Harrison finally emerged onto the Okene around 7 p.m. on Tuesday, May 28th, he was disoriented and believed it was still Sunday evening, that he had only been trapped for half a day. He was stunned to learn he had been underwater for more than 60 hours. He was immediately placed into a decompression chamber, where he spent another 2.5 days slowly readjusting his body to surface pressure. Out of the Jascon 4's 12 crew members, Harrison was the sole survivor. 10 bodies were recovered, while the search for the 11th had to be abandoned due to the hazardous conditions inside the wreck. In the end, Harrison made a full physical recovery and returned home to Warri, Nigeria. But emotionally, the ordeal left its mark. He did not attend the funerals of his fellow crew members, worried that their grieving families might view his survival with suspicion. While many Nigerians are deeply religious, superstition also runs strong. Rumors circulated that Harrison had escaped death through witchcraft. Alongside these whispers, he wrestled with survivors' guilt, haunted by the question of why he alone had lived while all the others perished. In the years since his miraculous survival, Harrison has struggled with lingering trauma. His wife, Akpovona, explains that he still suffers from recurring nightmares. At times, he bolts upright in bed, screaming and thrashing, convinced he is once again trapped underwater. Determined never to relive the horror, Harrison abandoned work at sea. He now earns his living as a cook on land, far from the dangers of the ocean. He also holds fast to a vow he made during those desperate hours in the sunken tug. "When I was trapped below, I promised God," Harrison recalls, "if you save me, I will never set foot on the sea again." That was the incredible story of Harrison Okene, the man who survived nearly 3 days trapped at the bottom of the sea. If you enjoyed this story, make sure to like the video and subscribe for more amazing survival tales. See you in the next one.